What's up, guys? Today we have Nick Fuentes talking about demonic powers, Freemasonry, and Christianity.
When I think about it, logically, it has to be, right? It can't just be Jewish people controlling everything. So there's different groups, right? I saw a clip of you from 2019, and you were talking about, this may get a little weird, but you were talking about, you were talking about adrenochrome. And you were talking about, you're like, yeah, it's 16 times more powerful than DMT. And you were like, and when people did DMT, they both took DMT and they saw sort of the same things, which means it's not here, but it's sort of like this different plane. And you were referencing then like vampires and all this stuff. And I kind of wanted your opinion on that stuff now. Like, do you think it's like, you know, everyone, these ideas around Satanists and people worshiping Moloch and Freemasons and all these different groups, do you think these things are still existing?
Yeah, I do. I really do. And I think that here's the thing. Like, demons are real.
I wanted to talk about this. Yeah.
Yeah. As a Catholic, we believe, you know, and it's in the Bible. It says we fight not against flesh and blood, but powers and principalities from other realms.
Right.
From other dimensions, you might say. So we, as Catholics, we're very clear. Angels and demons are real, and really, demons are angels. Demons are fallen angels. They're entities that have form but not substance. So they're not material, but they possess intellect and will. And there are good ones, and then there are the ones that join Satan, and they're in the world. And this is the source of temptation. This is the source of protection. Like, they are real, and I do believe that. And I don't have evidence for this, but I suspect that at the highest levels, there is like there are occult practices. And specifically, when you look at let's talk about like what the Freemasons are.
Yeah.
When you get into some of the Freemasonic rituals, do you know who the master builder is that they worship? It's King Solomon from the Bible, because King Solomon built the temple. That's what Masons are. They're builders. They're the guild of Masons. And so when they do if you go into a Masonic lodge, they do this elaborate ceremony about Solomon, because he got the blueprint, basically, the dimensions for the temple from God. And what Solomon did as the king of Israel is he had all of the different desert tribes from the Middle East come to the kingdom of Israel. It made Israel very rich. They would come and do trade and pay homage to Israel. But what Solomon did is he started to pay homage to their deities. So they would come from all the different Middle Eastern kingdoms with their own deities, probably demons. And Solomon would basically give sacrifices maybe, or worship those demons. That's ultimately why God punished him. And so that is what the Masons are involved in. It's sort of like, it is heavily involved with demons. It's based on Jewish mysticism. The other element, you could say, nobody talks about this, but Jews in the world are very mystical. There's a very long-standing mystic tradition. People don't realize this, but you have Jews and they read the Talmud, and the Talmud is just like a legal code. So they have like tons of books, and it tells you like how to brush your teeth and like what to eat and like rules for living your life. But there's another aspect of Judaism which is very mystical. It's called Kabbalah.
Yeah.
And that is something that is very much a part of their theology and very much a part of their religion. And Kabbalism is kind of where all of the occult springs from. Like, if you get into Aleister Crowley, if you get into the Masonic stuff, the Illuminati, it all really comes from Kabbalah. It all comes from like the Zohar. It all comes from those, let's say, hermeneutics about the book of Genesis, about the books of Moses. And so I do think that especially like some of these Jewish groups are involved in Kabbalistic. Like, certainly they're inspired by Kabbalistic ideas and practices. And I also think that even the non-Jewish ones are influenced by that too. So I do think that goes on at the highest levels.
Yeah, because, you know, when I look at it, there's the amount of money and the amount of power and the amount of control that, you know, the highest powers have. It just seems like, why go to the extent of harming other human life so much just for more money? Mm-hmm. It almost like makes you, because I would consider myself, I grew up Catholic. I would consider myself Christian. I'm not really big into organized religion because I think that was, in my opinion, that's one of the like, I hate to say it, I hate to talk about it this way, but it seemed to be like the first thing that was able to coerce people into what humans at the time wanted. Humans that realized we could recognize that we can make this organization, whatever it is, the Vatican, all these things, and we can tell people that this is what we need to do. And I just look at the Vatican, I'm like, they have all this money, and their mission is like to make the world better because they're coming from this Catholic standpoint, but they just have tons of money. They don't pay taxes. Like, so I felt out of like, I guess, rhythm with religion in general. The point that I'm trying to make is it can't just be money and power. Mm-hmm. Like there has to be something sinister behind the need for more or the complete lack of care of like certain people's lives versus others. It doesn't feel like it is just money. Like when I look at it, there's no way.
Yeah. No, there's definitely more to it. And anybody that's ever been in D.C. will tell you that. Washington, D.C. is just like a deeply evil place. There is something demonic about it. And there's something demonic about the people. Like, and I know a lot of people in D.C., they tell me it's like swingers and orgies. And you got to realize it's like this because the people there, they're involved in like machinations, scheming, destroying people, lying to the public all the time, like a craven lust for power. It's like the people that are in politics are among the most wicked in the world, and it goes hand in glove. You have like your regular sins, like the weird sexual stuff that goes on in DC, all the way up to, you know, maybe there's something supernatural, maybe there's something occult there. So I really do believe that the higher up the ladder you go, it does go beyond, let's say, avarice. It goes beyond greed. It goes beyond the usual kind of stuff, and it gets into something really sinister. I'm a huge believer in that.
Yeah. Do you think that could ever? Because it does feel like good versus evil. Do you think it ever? I hate to say this, but it seems like, in a lot of ways, evil's sort of winning. Like, do you think it switches?
I think it's in a constant flux. But over time, evil has been winning. Like, let's be very clear. The arc of history is long, and let's say that for the last 500 years, evil has definitely been winning.
Yeah.
Because you had a time once where, and I am a follower of organized religion. I'm Catholic.
Right.
You know, there was a time when Europe was controlled by the Catholic Church, and by Christian monarchs. Now, and what has happened over the past 500 years is that the authority of the church was overthrown in the Reformation, which plunged Europe into these religious wars. You know, at one time it was all Catholics, and then it became a war of all Catholics versus all Protestants. And these were like the prefigurement of the world wars because they were so intense and so broad in their scope. And then after that, you had the revolutions. You had the revolution in France. You had the revolution in America. And they overthrew the kings. And so in the late 18th century, you had like every country in Europe was a monarchy except for one. Now there are no monarchies. All the monarchies were overthrown. Now we have all these democracies.
Yeah.
Democracies that are totally corrupted by money, totally corrupted by lobbying, you know, these other interests. And now we have a society that's just like, does not bear any resemblance to the civilization from even 100 years ago. And it seems like every century, more authority, which is really of a moral variety, moral authority, political authority, the natural law, you could say some sense like the authority of nature, all of that has been totally degraded. And now you have a situation where, you know, where is the order? Where is the moral code? Where is the law? It seems like the law of the land now is do as thou wilt, which is the demonic axiom of the occultists.
But that's the thing that's frustrating. Like through religion, when you just look back in history, and it just always seemed to be, let's use this thing and force it on other people, or if they're not accepting of it, kill them, change their language, change their, you know.
Bro, okay, organized religion, as he calls it, has always been a thing. Because until our parents' generation, all people, not some, all people believed in God, okay? And the Catholic Church is the only one, I mean, even the Orthodox, that will never, ever accept a gay priest, LGBT flags on the church, or a women priest. But if you take a look at the Protestants and all the other false denominations, They accept these things. And some do and some don't. So if you don't have an organized religion, as he calls it, you don't have a foundation, because everybody has different opinions. And another thing, Bradley said, well, religion tells people to do as they say or they kill them. Bro, we are not Islam, okay? The first 300 years after the death and resurrection of Christ, Christianity was illegal, okay? So Catholics, Christian Catholics, because the Catholic Church was the original church founded by Jesus Christ when he gave the keys to Peter, were beheaded for being Christians, okay? So it's not the same. The apostles got killed for being followers of Christ. Christ got killed for being him. Why are you comparing us to Islam? It's not the same. We were killed for hundreds of years after Christ's death and resurrection, and Islam killed. Christians sacrificed themselves. Muslims killed. Totally different. It's the opposite. So generalizing like all religion are the same is just stupid.
Demographic over time, right? Because like we're going to take America being taken, and it just seems like it's always been used. And this is why I think I'm just so burnt out on the idea of organized religion and like everything that comes of it, because it's like as if man took, for example, when I think about Catholicism and God and Jesus Christ and what that means to be like a Christian, none of those things would align with let's kill those people because they don't agree with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I look at religion, I'm like, that's what religion has done for so many years. It's they've taken lands or they've taken places or they've taken power because they believe they know better.
So listen, this guy doesn't know anything. The Crusades were launched by the Pope because of Islamic and pagan invasions to Christian countries. Our men were getting killed, the women raped, and the kids killed. That's why the Crusades were launched. It's a defense. It's not an attack. In Islamic countries, Muslims behead Christians to this day. And we pay for them. We welcome them in our countries in Europe, America, and we pay for the food, the housing, and everything. That's clearly a fucking difference.
And the other people who are there because they're not agreeing with them. And it's like, is that what God wants? Is like that's not a godly thing. That's not a Jesus Christ thing. That's a human nature greed thing of I want power, I want control because I believe I should have it over you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I guess my question to you is sort of in regards to your perspective on, this nationalistic idea about America needs to be Christian or Catholic?
I mean, I don't think it'll ever be fully Catholic, at least not anytime soon. I think we should just be Christian for now.
Yeah. But so there's for your idea sometimes when it comes to like immigration and all this stuff, and I want to talk about one of these Trump tweets. He just tweeted like yesterday or today some wild shit about like we're going to stop completely, complete third world immigration. I'm going to ask your perspective on that. But I guess when I think of sometimes about the one thing that holds me up with your conversation around it is, and I think you had a conversation with Destiny about this, as much as I disagree with 99% of what that guy says, he did make one point about your sort of contention with Jewish people and Judaism and them sort of controlling, the world or America, right? Versus your perspective of wanting Catholics or Christianity to be the main driving force. What's really different there? If like you're then doing what they're trying to do, but you want to do what you're trying to do on the opposite spectrum,
right?
So what's the core difference?
Well, they are two different religions.
Fair, yeah.
And, it's sort of like saying, okay, two people have two different opinions. So no one's right. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Or there's two sides in a team game, I
guess the reason why I phrased that question that way was because everything else we just said about the sort of detriment of the controlling religious factions in history that have been just like, if you're not with me, you're an enemy and we're going to kill you. We're going to take your stuff. This is us now. Learn our religion, learn our language. It's in a way the same thing that, has caused all the biggest problems in the world.
Right.
So I'm not saying that like today, if Catholics were in charge of America, would they just then like kill, people somewhere else, right? Or kill people here? But there seems to be like when we're incorporating religion into at least what America is, from what I understand constitutionally, like when they originally did it, it was like, this needs to be separate. We need to separate these things because we're going to have so many different people here because that's what America is. And then your perspective is, well, I want it to be this way.
Well, I mean, for starters, the founding fathers never intended that we were going to have diversity. When America was founded, it was almost all English Protestants for the most part, except there were some Catholics in Maryland, but it was basically all English Protestants. And in Federalist Number 2 by John Jay, these are the papers that it was John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, I think James Madison. They wrote 50-some papers in favor of the Constitution, to adopt the Constitution.
Yeah.
And in the second Federalist paper, John Jay writes this. He's very clear about this in the end. He said, God gave us this land, one continent for one people, with one language, one religion, with common characteristics from one place. Like, it was very clear. There's no diversity. And in the 1790 immigration law, one of the first laws, they said it's going to be white people moving here. In the election in 1800, Alexander Hamilton wanted to make it a law that you could not run for office if you're not Christian, to prevent Thomas Jefferson from becoming president because he wasn't really a Christian. And at the time of the founding, most of the colonies that became the states had like state-run churches. Like they each had their own church that worked with the government. So, our conception of America is formed out of the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights era, where you had the ACLU and the ADL and a lot of Jewish groups, as well as a lot of pro-black groups, and MLK Jr. and the rest of them. They basically reconstituted America in the 60s, where they said, actually, America's for everybody. America's about diversity and all the different races and religions hanging out. But from 1600 until 1960, America was almost all white, all Christian. And you can look at like every president even. Abraham Lincoln did not want to free the slaves. That's not why he fought the Civil War. And Abraham Lincoln, before he died, was working vigorously to send all the freed slaves back to Africa. This was like this is not talked about in history books, but Abraham Lincoln tried really hard. They had colonies in Liberia was one of them, and another colony in Central America. They tried to send all the freed blacks back because every president from Washington through to, you could say almost Harry Truman, they said that we never intended for whites and blacks to live together with full social and legal equality. And I'm not arguing for that.
Right.
But that is historically what they believed. Now, it is a matter of fact that America has become diverse and racially integrated. And, the Constitution was changed a number of times. And we have to figure out, I think that we want to live in harmony. I like the words harmony, cooperation. I think the races should cooperate. And I want there to be peace and respect and dignity between the races. But we have to keep in mind that the founding fathers, when they devised this system, they did not devise it with a multiracial, religiously pluralistic society in mind. That's not, and I don't think it works that way. I think it's very difficult to make self-governance work when you have a ton of different types of people living in a giant empire like we have. I think we kind of need to rethink
I see
that.
what you're saying. I see what you're saying. And so you're saying that during the civil rights movement, that's when it really changed.
Yeah, they fundamentally changed what America is.
And who was driving that?
It was a lot of, and it's not to blame the Jews, but like it was a lot of Jewish groups with the Black Power movement. And the reason why, they say this very clearly. In the turn of the last century, a ton of Jews moved to the United States from Eastern Europe. Around 1900, almost all of the world's Jews were living in Poland and Russia. They were living in the Pale of Settlement. And they fled because there was a lot of anti-Semitism in Russia under the Tsar, Alexander III, Nicholas II. And so a lot of the Jews came to the United States, and what they encountered was legitimate anti-Semitism. They couldn't get jobs. They couldn't go to university. There were quotas. There was just like a lack of opportunity. And so the Jews got together as lawyers and judges and academics. And, they also came from other parts of Europe, from Germany, from Central Europe, from England. And they said, we need to work together to advance equality for all people. Because if we have like a legal framework in the United States where discrimination is illegal, then we are free to ascend. We can move up the ladder. And so they formed up these groups like the American Jewish Congress, the American Jewish Committee, the ADL, and these specifically lawyers and judges, they started to fight for anti-discrimination, for diversity, for all, the idea of the melting pot came from a Jewish playwright, Israel Zangwill. He said, no, America's for everybody. And they said that they would join up with all immigrant groups and the black people too, and they were going to make a case for equality for everybody, because if they fought discrimination generally, then they can bring all of the marginalized people on the same team against the white majority. And like the rising tide would lift everybody's boats, Jewish people included.
Right.
And so the Jewish lawyers were a major force in the 50s, 60s, and 70s for all of it. Affirmative action, integration, desegregation, the civil rights law, the voting rights, all this kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, I'm in favor of some of it. I'm not in favor of Jim Crow, but they forcibly integrated society. The other thing is they also supported mass migration. They fought against national origins quotas. Because, in the 24 Immigration Act and other immigration laws, they said, we don't want all these Jews from Poland. And so Jews fought to make it so that it didn't matter where you came from. You could come from Mexico, you could come from Africa, you can come from China. We're not going to control immigration by your national origin. So, when you think about this like beast in America on the left, which is DEI, affirmative action, mass migration, even the woke like BLM stuff, it all really proceeds from that.
Yeah, I completely agree with Nick. And the separation between church and state was meant to end the fights between the Protestants and the Catholics. It was never about bringing tens of millions of Muslims and Indians. So yeah, guys, let me know in the comments what you think. If you agree or disagree, leave a like if you want to. Christ is King, and God bless.